Good Monday morning, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend. It's very cold here again. We're trying to heat up the house. But I'm kind of bundled up this morning, and it's just not to look pretty. That's just a bonus. But I'm cold, okay. Anyway, what I've got here is an old edition of Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Rite. That's the Scottish Rite. It's by Albert Pike. And when my dad joined the Scottish Rite in 1948, the year I was born, when the class reached the 32nd degree, they were presented this big book, and it really is a big book. And it talks about, it gives like a lecture for every degree. And the lecture, Albert Pike was a very, very well-educated man in comparative religions and philosophy and Hermeticism and such, and more than any other single individual, Albert Pike was responsible for the development and spread of the Scottish Rite in especially in the United States. Now, people are always asking, you know, should I join the AA or should I join the Masons, or should I join the OTO or the Masons, or should I join, because I want to learn all of this stuff, okay? Should I join the Golden Dawn or the Masons? Yeah. Well, because most every town has at least one Masonic lodge meeting regularly. And larger towns have Scottish Rite valleys and such. And you hear how mystical and everything the Scottish Rite is. But to tell you the truth, okay, and to be quite frank, Masonry, at least as it is developed and presented in the United States, is not an occult organization. They don't teach magic. They don't teach tarot. They really don't even teach Kabbalah. It's kind of hard to explain, but it is full of magic. It is full of Kabbalah. It just doesn't teach it. Okay? And the Scottish Rite is a series of degrees. From the 4th degree, you must be a Master Mason, in the United States, a Master Mason or 3rd degree Mason. And the Scottish Rite has the degrees of 4 through 32nd, the 33rd being honorary and administrative. And the Scottish Rite is awesomely beautiful, and I mean awesomely beautiful, theatrically stunning and beautiful and life-changing and inspiring. But it doesn't teach a Kabbalah class. It doesn't teach a magic class. It does mention, at least the Scottish Rite starts to mention in the degree presentations, it mentions the Kabbalah, and it mentions it a lot. But if you want to know more about the Kabbalah, you're going to have to dig it out yourself, because most valleys don't go on to elucidate any further, okay? Masonry is a big tent, and if you don't want to study Kabbalah, you don't have to. But you got to hear about it, at least. Morals and Dogma has perhaps one of the best occult dictionaries just in its index. It has a huge index. The index runs over 200 pages. Yes, 216 pages just of index. And look at, starting, they spell Kabbalah with a K. Look at all the references to Kabbalah. Oh, it goes on page after page. And it finally ends up talking about Kabbalah with the word kether, the first sefer on the tree of life. So, a 32nd degree Mason would pick this up and learn just with the index. Kabbalah concentrates the alliance of the universal reason and divine word. Kabbalah contains the doctrine logical, simple, absolute. Kabbalah contains the source of many doctrines. Kabbalah establishes the counterposes of opposite forces of balance and being. Pike was brilliant. If he was just a little naughtier, he would have been the Crowley of his day. Kabbalah gives to Masonry secrets and symbols. Kabbalah struggles hard to understand and explain processes of creation. Kabbalah, creation affected by the omnific letter of Yod He Vav He. Kabbalah doctrines of the Persians, Gnostics, and Zen Advesta, similar to where else is Kabbalah? In active realization, the magic of works is Hermeticism. Okay, I could go on, and nowadays we don't get a full morals and dogma, but we get something almost more approachable anyway. And this is what we're presented. It's Bridge to Life by Rex R. Hutchinson. And it's more approachable. But believe me, there's lots of Kabbalah in A Bridge to Light, too. So, all of that being said, when I joined the Scottish Rite when I was 50 years old, so I guess we're talking 24 years ago, my valley, which is Long Beach Scottish Rite bodies, which is the same one my father belonged to in Long Beach, California. It wasn't long before they realized that I write books, and that some of my books were on Kabbalah. One of them was, of course, The Key to Solomon's Key, Secrets of Magic and Masonry. But the Chicken Kabbalah, believe it or not, Chicken Kabbalah, as goofy as its name is, it's a pretty good introduction to Hermetic Kabbalah. And so they asked me, but here's how it goes, okay, with the Scottish Rite. As I said, it's the 4th degree through 32nd. Now, there are landmark degrees, okay, just major degrees, that if you just take those degrees, if you just are confirmed those degrees, you can claim and be a bona fide 32nd degree Mason without having to actually take each of those individual degrees. You have to take the landmark degrees that sort of bundle the magic juice, if you will, of of the individual degrees into these major degrees. But if your valley is conscientious or wealthy enough or devoted enough or enthused enough, they will put on all of the degrees. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Okay. And it takes about a year to go through them all. You sort of sacrifice every Friday night for a year, and they put on a full stage production with a cast and costumes and sets and awesome. And because it's Long Beach, it was the Masons, Scottish Rite Masons back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, who were in the Hollywood business, the set makers and the costume makers and stuff, were everywhere. So the production, the mounting of these degrees at the Long Beach Scottish Rite at the time was awesome. It was a world-class experience. And I was lucky enough to literally audit every one of those degrees and get my card punched. Okay. And so sometimes in Europe they go, oh, you're a 32nd degree, oh, but you just went through 5 ceremonies. You Americans. No, I went through them all. And I was lucky enough that I had a little group to go in with me too, my brothers. Why am I telling you all of this on a Monday? It's because I was honored to deliver the pre-initiation lecture when the class series moved out of the Lodge of Perfection, and they're getting ready to take the 15th through 18th degree, which is called the chapter Rose-Croix section. It actually deals with Kabbalah. It talks about Kabbalah. It points to Kabbalah. It references Kabbalah. And so they have little lectures prior to the class taking the degree that evening. 30-minute kind of thing. And where they talk about historical things or they talk about Egyptian things, there's little lectures on Egyptian things and stuff. But I was asked to do the Kabbalah and an introduction to Kabbalah. And I ran across it this morning, and I'm going to read it to you, whether you like it or not. So here goes. Now the Masons, or at least Albert Pike, spelled his Kabbalah this way. We could call it the Masonic spelling of Kabbalah. K-A-B-A-L-A-H. Now, a lot of Orthodox Jewish Kabbalists spell it K-A-B-B-A-L-A or L-A-H. Christian Kabbalists of the Renaissance spelled it with a C. And Hermeticists, because the actual Hebrew letter that is used to spell the word that sounds Kabbalah is a Q. Kuf. So most modern Masons, most modern Hermetic magicians spell it with a Q, like Rabbi Laban Ben Clifford. I've studied Kabbalah for over 25 years. Well, now I could probably say 50. But I've studied Kabbalah for over 25 years before I joined the Scottish Rite, and was privileged to audit all degrees presented here in Long Beach. My familiarity with Kabbalistic concepts amplified my appreciation of the rituals, and I felt bad for some of the others in the class who were missing out on many of the symbolic treasures presented in each ritual. If you are lucky enough to have a Morals and Dogma with the digest index at the end, you'll notice that there are no less than 65 direct references to Kabbalah. In addition to that, there are literally hundreds of additional references to Kabbalistic concepts, traditions, and buzzwords. In the index to our Bridge to Light, we find 35 direct entries for Kabbalah, and the text is also filled with many additional Kabbalistic references. Obviously, Kabbalah should be a subject of interest to Scottish Rite Masons. The Kabbalah is a huge subject, and we're obviously not going to learn very much in the 10 minutes or so we have tonight, but let's at least try to scratch a tiny bit of the surface. I'll talk fast, and I should be around afterwards to answer questions and try to lure you out into the parking lot to buy my book. Okay, what is Kabbalah? Let's start by learning what it's not. Kabbalah is not a religion. We often hear the Kabbalah referred to as Hebrew mysticism, which is accurate up to a point, but more than that, the Kabbalah, like Freemasonry, is non-sectarian and opens her mysteries to sincere and diligent seekers of any and all religious persuasions. Kabbalah is not a belief system. Although there are a number of Orthodox institutions that apply the tools of Kabbalistic thought to engage in exegesis upon various scriptures they hold sacred, the Kabbalah itself is not a belief system. Rather, it's a way of looking at things. It's a way of organizing the universe so neatly that we eventually can discover our own place in it. It is a way of connecting absolutely everything in the universe with absolutely everything else until eventually we achieve a level of consciousness in which we realize there is nothing left to connect. Kabbalah is not a book. But there are many Kabbalistic texts, including key books of the Torah and the Talmud and the New Testament. Kabbalistic tradition, and as Masons we know that tradition and history are sometimes two different things. Kabbalistic tradition holds that these texts and many others not so well known were crafted by mystics possessed of a profound understanding of the universe and the mysteries of human existence. At a time when writing was a mystery reserved for priests and royalties, they used poetry and parables to express thoughts that everyday language could not accommodate. They assembled the phrases with great art from individual words that conveyed an even deeper level of truth. And finally, each word was made up of unique symbolic letters, each of which revealed yet another story, a story so profound and abstract that it could only be told and understood in the pure language of numbers and mathematics. These sages were full-time holy guys. They wrote this stuff for other full-time holy guys. And the tiny segment of every generation who could be equipped with the intelligence, the spiritual drive, and yes, the leisure time necessary to embark upon a lifelong quest for enlightenment. I believe Albert Pike expected Scottish Rite Masons to be among this elite category of seeker. On page 112 of Bridge to Light, Dr. Hutchins writes the following concerning Kabbalah. The cycle of closeness to and distance from God experienced by the Hebrews found expression in the deep symbolic mysticism that arose in medieval Judaism. Of whatever origins, okay, he's not even saying that that's true, okay, of whatever origins, the founders of this system sought to create a purely symbolic and primarily numerological expression of the relationship of deity to man. Even a name was given to distinguish the Kabbalistic concept of God from that of conventional Judaism. Ein Sof, the inexpressible, incomprehensible, ineffable, divine source of all things. Unquote. Ein Sof roughly translates limitless nothing. It is one of the three levels of negative existence that Kabbalists say precede creation. In the language of modern physics, it is the negative singularity that preceded the Big Bang. Now, that's pretty heavy stuff and not easy to think about. And it's also impossible to think about by using our normal day-to-day language. That's why we need another kind of language. Brother Hutchins goes on to say, quote, an essential element in the formation of this mystical theory was to effect an adequate means for the description of God within the limited framework of human language. This was accomplished by transcending language through numerological symbolism. You will regularly hear references made to the numerology of Kabbalah in the rituals of the degrees of the Scottish Rite. The most important point to remember is that the Hebrew letters are given number equivalents, so every word was itself a number, the sum of the numerical values of the individual letters, unquote. I'm just briefly going to give you one example of how this is done. Now, I gave everybody a handout of the Hebrew alphabet with their numerical equivalents. Please take a look at your handout that is the table of Hebrew letters. There are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. 5 of them appear differently when they're placed at the end of a word. You'll notice that each of them represents a number and has a specific meaning. If your name happens to be Al, like Al Turek, one of the most beloved and brilliant members of the Long Beach Scottish Rite, and his son too, happens to be Al, A-L, like Al Turek, it would be spelled Aleph Lamed. Aleph Lamed. See, Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30. Aleph means ox, and Lamed means ox goad. Okay, I guess that means that Al, A-L, is self-motivated. I'm not trying to be smart there, okay? Self-motivated. A-L is the word for God, okay? It means God. And what is the most self-motivated force in the universe? God. A-L. In Hebrew, A-L is the root of the word God. If you spell it backwards, L-A, it means not or nothing. Can you see the possibilities here? Another brief example is the Hebrew word for riches and power. It's spelled Daleth Bet Aleph, or DBA. Okay, I didn't write out in Hebrew, but riches equals DBA. Makes a nice 7. But if you spell it backwards, it spells ABD, or the word for loss and ruin. Okay, if we spell DBA backwards, we get the word ABD, which means lost or ruin. While it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that the opposite of riches and power is loss and ruin, the order and meaning of the individual Hebrew letters in these words also tells a simple but profound story. The word riches, DBA, suggests a door, Daleth means door, to a house, Bet or B means house, or a barn, or an enclosure, or a container. And Aleph, or A, means ox, a symbol of the wealth of the culture. It's an ancient symbol of wealth. Okay. However, the word loss or ruin, the ABD, reverses the letters and suggests that the ox, A, of wealth, finds the barn door, Daleth, and escapes. Or in other words, to put it bluntly, door plus barn plus ox equals good. Ox plus barn plus door equals bad. We could play all night with this, and actually we could play with this for the rest of our lives. But we've got a long night ahead of us. Let's finish up what Brother Hutchins has to say in A Bridge to Light. Quote, as well, concise yet complex diagrams were created to explain the nature of deity. Among these was called the Tree of Life, and I had a nice big Tree of Life diagram to show them, point to. This was a diagram variously designed to illustrate the 10 emanations from or manifestations of deity called Sephiroth. Let's take a look at the first diagram of the Tree of Life, the one with Ein Sof at the top. You'll notice that there are 10 circles which are joined by 22 paths. The 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet will find a home on the 22 paths. But what are the 10 circles, and where did they come from? The 10 circles are called Sephiroth, which means roughly emanations. Just as there can be only one absolute deity, there is really only one real Sephiroth, the top one. The other 9 are just what we see when we look at the top Sephiroth with progressively darker sunglasses. Because we are made in the image of deity, according to Kabbalists, the Tree of Life is also a map of ourselves. The 3 pillars are reminiscent of our 3 pillars of wisdom, strength, and beauty, Masonic pillars. The 10 Sephiroth also represent 10 levels of consciousness. Number 10 at the bottom is the most mundane and earthly, and number 1 at the top is the consciousness of supreme deity. Why there are 10 Sephiroth is a long and interesting story, and has to do primarily with the fact that we have 10 fingers. I have to wrap up now. And I can't think of a better way than for us to hear from Albert Pike himself. One is filled with admiration on penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah. At seeing a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time so absolute. The necessary union of ideas and signs, the concentration of the most fundamental realities by primitive characters, the trinity of words, letters, and numbers. A philosophy simple as the alphabet, profound and infinite as the word. Theorems more complete and luminous than those of Pythagoras. A theology summed up by counting on one's fingers. An infinite which can be held in the hollow of an infant's hand. 10 ciphers and 22 letters, a triangle, a square, and a circle. These are the elements of the Kabbalah. They are the elementary principles of the written word, reflection of that spoken word that created the world. Thank you very much, and enjoy your degrees. And that's where I'll end my little lecture today, just because I delivered that to the incoming class of candidates about to take their chapter Rose-Croix degrees. Everything I said, nothing that I said was secret or proprietary. So I'm violating no oaths by sharing that with you, and I'm glad I found it so I could share it with you. Until tomorrow, we'll figure out something else. Continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.